And I think I'm really glad to see so many folks out here supporting Fare Free, because this is an extremely important issue that affects every single worker, not just in Worcester, but also in the surrounding neighborhoods, or surrounding cities and towns rather, that also rely on the WRTA, which we can't forget as well. So, you know, these fares being reinstated, as someone mentioned, I think Nelly mentioned, is a decrease in workers' wages in a period of time where there's still extreme, economic downturn. Many people have lost hours and therefore have lost funds. Many people are still unemployed, and much of those funds are running out. Many people are struggling with housing even more so than ever. So the idea of adding yet another cost onto workers' plates, especially, there's all this talk about essential workers' plates that have gotten us through this pandemic, is absurd, and really demonstrates that the WRTA Advisory Board and Dennis Lipka do not have the interest of the actual people of Worcester at the heart of making their decisions. Indeed, shame on them. But it's not just about them as individuals, it's about the perspective that they're taking. And that's not primarily, Dennis Lipka, I think, has summarized it quite well. His perspective is more cared about the checkbook of the WRTA 6 years from now, rather than actually serving the needs of working people right now. That's a completely flawed perspective that we would argue is ultimately rooted in capitalism, right? In far too focused on pinching pennies rather than doing the bold leadership that's needed to actually fight for what workers need.
Think outside the box!
Thank you. Indeed. So this, and that's not just me saying something, that's something that he said a number of times, this 6 years figure, as he's thinking long term. Well, so are we. And the long-term effects of continuing to effectively exert yet another tax on workers that are already taxed to death. Meanwhile, there's all this wealth of these 11 different universities and major hospitals that pay almost nothing in terms of taxes, pay no taxes and pay very little voluntary payments, called payments in lieu of taxes, when we could instead, as in fact, a number of bodies have already pointed out, like the Worcester Research Bureau, we could instead be demanding that they pay their fair share and fund not just Fare Free, but fund more buses so that they can run more regularly, that they fund more bus drivers so they can be less overworked, that they have increased pay, especially in this extremely dangerous time where many bus drivers didn't happen as much in Worcester, but throughout this country we're dying at extremely high rates compared to the general population due to COVID. All these things could be paid for and far more. We could have a far more expensive and far more reliable, we could add additional routes to the WRTA, and all that's possible quite literally tomorrow. But it takes the will to fight for it. We have to build a movement to fight for it, because the WRTA Advisory Board and Dennis Lipka have very clearly shown us that they have no interest in actually leading on this issue. And so it's going to take us. It's going to take us doing this organizing work. It's going to take us, reaching the broader layers, working with unions, working with the ATU, the Amalgamated Transit Union that represents the bus drivers of the WRTA, and figuring out a strategy, coming together so we can really fight on this issue, not just for fiscal year 2022, which is extremely important, and we need to make that happen, but in the long term too, because this can be sustainably funded, and we can go far beyond it. But it's going to take us fighting for it to do it. The WRTA Advisory Board and its so-called director are not going to do that for us.
Yay!
Thank you so much, Jai.